Welcome back to U.S. Command Instant. Today, what you're about to hear represents one of the most consequential events in modern Middle Eastern history, a weapons transfer of unprecedented scale, one that the Western intelligence community failed to detect until it was already complete. North Korea has delivered 500 Hwasong-18 intercontinental ballistic missiles to Iran, the most advanced solid-fuel ICBM Pyongyang has ever developed. During its 2023 test launches, this missile demonstrated a range exceeding 15,000 kilometers, capable of striking not just Israel or American bases across the Middle East, but the continental United States itself. These 500 missiles were moved in a covert operation of extraordinary audacity, and now they sit in hardened underground Iranian facilities, fully fueled, targeted, and ready. Take a moment to let that number sink in. 500. By comparison, the United States currently deploys approximately 400 Minuteman III ICBMs in its entire land-based nuclear force. The missiles Iran has just received surpass America's entire ground-based strategic nuclear inventory. Unlike the Minuteman III, whose silo locations have been known and mapped for decades, the Hwasong-18 platforms are road mobile. They move, they hide, and they can be dispersed across Iran's vast territory in ways that make preemptive targeting virtually impossible, without real-time intelligence of a quality that no satellite constellation currently provides. Israel woke up to a fundamentally altered strategic reality. For half a century, Washington has guaranteed Israel a qualitative military edge, ensuring its delivery systems outmatch any combination of regional adversaries. That edge has now been obliterated by a single transfer agreement between two sanctioned, isolated nations. A transfer that decades of Western efforts had tried to prevent. The question on the minds of defense ministries from Tel Aviv to Washington to Riyadh is no longer whether this transfer happened. Independent satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and human sources confirm it beyond reasonable doubt. The urgent question now is, what happens next? How does Israel respond to an adversary armed with 500 ICBMs, each capable of carrying nuclear payloads with guidance systems no regional missile defense was built to intercept? What does Washington do when the deterrence framework it has maintained for half a century faces a rapidly changing threat environment? Tonight, we'll break down the transfer, how it happened, why Western intelligence failed to prevent it, the technical capabilities of the Hwasong-18, and the strategic ripple effects across Israel, the United States, and the global order. 3 questions guide this analysis. First, how did North Korea and Iran execute a transfer of 500 advanced ICBMs without triggering Western interdiction? Second, what does the Hwasong-18's capability mean for Israel's defense and American power projection in the Middle East? Third, with Iran now possessing the largest road-mobile ICBM force outside Russia and China, what realistic options remain? And is there a path that avoids a nuclear confrontation on a scale unseen since the Cuban Missile Crisis? The answers are unsettling but necessary. If this channel has been providing analysis that cuts through official narratives, now is the moment to ensure you never miss an update. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with anyone serious about understanding global power dynamics. Drop your assessment in the comments. I want to know what you think the next move will be from Tehran, Pyongyang, Tel Aviv, and Washington. A city running out of options faster than most public officials will admit. To understand how this transfer occurred without interception, we must examine 2 key factors: the genuine limits of Western intelligence against compartmentalized operations between sanctioned states, and the extraordinary measures taken by both Pyongyang and Tehran to remain invisible. This was no overnight operation. It reflects a decade-long relationship, accelerating after the collapse of the JCPOA in 2018, and reaching new heights following North Korea's successful artillery transfers to Russian forces in Ukraine, which provided hard currency and proof that large-scale covert logistics could succeed under surveillance. The transfer exploited 3 simultaneous vulnerabilities in Western intelligence: geographic, temporal, and deceptive. Geographically, the route ran overland through Chinese territory, then via Iranian-controlled corridors and Russian-permitted transit into northwestern Iran, avoiding maritime choke points and airspace monitored by American assets. Temporally, shipments were small and phased over 14 months, too minor individually to trigger alarms. Deception involved maintaining normal operations at no missile facilities while using secondary concealed sites for actual transfers. The result? The Western intelligence apparatus missed 500 missiles until they were already inside fortified Iranian facilities, immune to conventional military action without catastrophic escalation. Once the transfer was confirmed, emergency sessions convened simultaneously in Washington, Tel Aviv, London, and every Gulf capital with a significant U.S. military presence. What emerged from those discussions was not a plan. It was the sobering realization that there is no clean solution. Every option carries consequences so severe that no government in the Western alliance is politically positioned to accept them without risking outcomes worse than the problem itself. Iran's response was measured, but strategically devastating. There were no triumphant announcements, no press conferences. The missiles simply existed, and the implications spoke for themselves. This restraint alone signaled confidence, knowing the objective had been achieved and that nothing an adversary does now could reverse it. The Hwasong-18 first entered global awareness in April 2023 when North Korea conducted its initial test launch under the observation of Kim Jong-un. Analysis of telemetry and trajectory reconstruction confirmed a generational leap in North Korean ballistic missile technology. By extension, any state in possession of these missiles now possesses a fundamentally transformed strike capability. To understand why the Hwasong-18 renders existing Iranian and regional defenses effectively obsolete, we must examine four critical dimensions: propulsion, range, guidance, and survivability. The propulsion system alone marks a stark departure from previous Iranian and North Korean designs. Earlier ICBMs relied on liquid fuel, which required hours of pre-launch preparation, producing thermal and chemical signatures detectable by satellites and ground sensors. This fueling sequence was a window of vulnerability that preemptive strike doctrines targeted. The Hwasong-18, in contrast, uses a three-stage solid fuel system, the most advanced solid fuel architecture North Korea has produced. Solid fuel is preloaded and stored within the missile, allowing rapid launch within minutes and generating a thermal signature only in the seconds before ignition. This is not a minor improvement, it is a transformation. Preemptive strike becomes nearly impossible against a dispersed road-mobile solid fuel force. Range compounds the strategic challenge. The Hwasong-18 demonstrated a maximum trajectory exceeding 15,000 kilometers from anywhere in Iranian territory. It can strike Tel Aviv, every American base across the Middle East, European NATO capitals, and even targets in the continental United States. Iran's possession of 500 such missiles instantly elevates it from regional power to a nation capable of global reach. The guidance system adds another layer of complexity. Using an inertial navigation system augmented by stellar navigation, the Hwasong-18 operates independently of GPS or other satellite-based systems, making it immune to jamming or spoofing by American electronic warfare. Terminal accuracy is estimated at 100 and 150 meters for conventional payloads, sufficient for reliable destruction of city-scale targets, and even against military installations, the missile reliably reaches its designated area. In other words, the threat is as precise as it is pervasive. Finally, the survivability architecture completes the threat profile. Each Hwasong-18 carries a maneuverable re-entry vehicle capable of evasive maneuvers at hypersonic speed, significantly complicating interception. Systems like THAAD, deployed to protect the region, were designed for non-maneuvering re-entry vehicles. Israel's A3 platform faces the same challenge. Algorithms built for predictable ballistic trajectories are ineffective against a vehicle that changes course during terminal descent. Now multiply this by 500 missiles, each road mobile, dispersed, and operationally independent. No existing defense system can neutralize them. This is not a threat that incremental upgrades can resolve. It demands a complete rethinking of strategic assumptions that Israeli and American planners have relied on for decades. The nuclear dimension intensifies the dilemma. Hwasong-18 was designed as a nuclear delivery platform. Whether the missiles now in Iran carry nuclear warheads, conventional payloads, or await future warhead mating is unknown. This ambiguity itself is a deterrent. Every potential launch must be treated as nuclear, shaping operational planning around the most extreme scenario. Washington's response to this unprecedented transfer is constrained by the stark reality that every available option carries enormous risks. Within hours of the transfer confirmation, the U.S. National Security Council convened a 9-hour emergency session. The result was not a decision, but a documented assessment that no course of action could eliminate the threat without triggering consequences potentially worse than the problem itself. This paralysis is not incompetence. It is a rational acknowledgement of a genuine strategic dilemma. Option 1, a direct military strike against Iranian ICBM facilities, appears straightforward. Iran has acquired a weapon system of unmatched scale and lethality. The logic is intuitive. Strike first to remove the capability before it can be used. This approach aligns with decades of American and Israeli preemptive strike doctrine. But the Hwasong-18s are road mobile and dispersed across Iranian territory. Targeting 500 mobile launchers requires an extensive campaign involving hundreds of strike sorties over days or weeks. It is not a limited precision operation. It is a war. The consequences of such a campaign are catastrophic. Iran has a demonstrated capacity to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, activate Hezbollah and other proxy networks, and target American bases throughout the region with its existing missile arsenal. The economic cost of a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz alone could reach several $1 trillion in the first 90 days. Casualties among U.S. military personnel could number in the thousands, and civilian losses in Israel could be devastating. Option 1, while intuitively appealing, leads to a regional war whose costs dwarf any tactical gains. Option 2 relies on covert action, sabotage, cyber operations, or targeted elimination of the technical personnel required to operate the missiles. Historically, Western intelligence has been effective in this domain, disabling Iranian nuclear programs, targeting scientists, or sabotaging missile tests. The challenge is temporal. Covert operations unfold over years, while the strategic threat posed by 500 already deployed ICBMs is immediate. Covert action may degrade future capabilities, but does nothing to alter today's deterrence reality. Option 3 is diplomatic pressure combined with escalating sanctions to compel Iran to return or destroy the missiles. This option runs counter to Iranian strategic logic. Tehran did not acquire 500 Hwasong-18s to surrender them. Their purpose is clear: to create a deterrence reality so overwhelming that military pressure becomes unacceptably costly. Asking Iran to voluntarily relinquish such a capability is tantamount to requesting strategic vulnerability, something no Iranian administration would accept. Option 4 involves accelerated deployment of advanced missile defenses. Additional THAAD batteries, SM-3 interceptors aboard Aegis destroyers, or potentially classified next-generation intercept capabilities. Politically, this is the most palatable, as it appears decisive without initiating war. Mathematically, it fails. The United States currently possesses only a fraction of the interceptors needed to counter a 500 missile salvo. Producing enough interceptors quickly would take years and tens of billions of dollars. Even a theoretically perfect intercept system favors Iran economically. Each interceptor costs roughly $10 million, while each Hwasong-18 delivered at discounted strategic partnership pricing costs a fraction of that. Iran can sustain an exchange indefinitely. The U.S. cannot. Option 5, direct negotiation with Iran. Trading security guarantees or sanctions relief for a commitment not to deploy the missiles offensively is politically unacknowledged, but strategically the only path to avoid catastrophe. Its challenge lies in domestic optics. no American administration can publicly recognize that Iran has achieved a deterrence position that must be respected. The appearance of capitulation to a sanctioned adversary carries political costs Washington is not prepared to absorb. This gridlock explains the apparent paralysis in Washington. It is not failure, but the outcome of a strategic situation in which every choice is either militarily catastrophic, strategically untenable, or politically impossible. The administration's current course is to buy time, signal resolve through visible but non-decisive military maneuvers, and hope that circumstances evolve to create new options. Hope is not a strategy, but it is the only tool available in the current strategic environment. Meanwhile, Israel faces its own existential recalibration. For decades, Israeli strategy has relied on the Samson option, a never officially acknowledged doctrine. If Israel faces an existential threat, it cannot counter conventionally. It retains the option of nuclear retaliation against the source of that threat. Named for the biblical figure who destroyed himself and his enemies when facing certain death, this option has underpinned Israel's deterrence logic. The confirmation of 500 Hwasong-18 forces Israeli planners to confront a challenge the Samson option was never designed to address: an adversary capable of absorbing a nuclear strike and still delivering a retaliatory nuclear response. Israel's response to this unprecedented threat has been swift and exhaustive. The nation has activated the highest alert levels across all military branches, placing every system and unit on continuous readiness. 3 missile defense batteries have been prepared for immediate engagement, and THAAD systems provided by the United States have been repositioned to optimize coverage against trajectory profiles consistent with Iranian ICBM launches. Underground command centers, long maintained for continuity of government and operational security, are now fully staffed and operating around the clock. Meanwhile, Israel's nuclear submarine force, the ultimate guarantor of the Samson option and second strike capability, has been dispersed into patrol positions across the Mediterranean and Red Seas, ensuring that even in the worst-case scenario, the ability to retaliate remains intact. These measures represent a state of maximum operational readiness, but they also underline a strategic reality. Israel has never faced the emergence of a peer nuclear deterrent in the region. For decades, Israel has enjoyed the status of the Middle East's sole nuclear power, a position that enabled it to maintain a stable deterrence posture. The introduction of 500 road-mobile long-range missiles into Iran's arsenal transforms the strategic landscape overnight. The traditional advantages of monopoly deterrence are gone. Mutual assured destruction now applies not only in theory, but as a tangible threat that could directly challenge Israeli cities and military installations. From Washington's perspective, the strategic calculus has also shifted dramatically. The Hwasong-18's capabilities eliminate many of the options that policymakers have long considered viable. A conventional strike, as previously outlined, is no longer precise or limited. It would spark a region-wide conflict with immense human, economic, and geopolitical costs. Covert operations are too slow to affect the current threat. Diplomatic and sanctions-based approaches collide with Iran's strategic logic, which intentionally leverages its newly acquired capability as leverage against coercion. Missile defense expansion, while politically convenient, is economically unsustainable and cannot guarantee protection against massed launches. And direct negotiation, though potentially stabilizing, remains politically toxic. The U.S. is caught in a dilemma where every option carries catastrophic risks. Israel and Washington now face the challenge of maintaining deterrence credibility in a radically altered environment. The Hwasong-18s are not simply weapons. They are strategic instruments designed to shift the balance of power. Their rapid deployment, mobility, and survivability mean that preemptive countermeasures are limited, and every response must account for Iran's potential retaliatory capability. The presence of 500 such missiles creates a new form of strategic ambiguity. Planners cannot know whether the missiles carry nuclear warheads, conventional payloads, or are intended as future nuclear delivery platforms. This uncertainty amplifies the deterrence effect compelling adversaries to treat every launch as potentially catastrophic. In response, Israeli and U.S. military commands have intensified intelligence operations to monitor Iranian movements, seeking real-time tracking of mobile launchers and communications networks. Cyber operations, electronic surveillance, and signal intelligence have been pushed to their operational limits. But even these advanced measures face limits given the missile's mobility, hardened storage, and sophisticated countermeasures. The operational reality is that detection alone does not equate to neutralization, and the window for a meaningful preemptive strike has effectively closed. At the same time, regional allies are reevaluating their security postures. Nations across the Gulf, accustomed to the assurance of American military dominance and Israel's qualitative edge, are now confronted with a power capable of reaching beyond the Middle East. This recalibration could drive accelerated procurement of advanced defense systems, changes in military doctrine, and heightened coordination with the United States. Yet, even these adjustments will take time, and the immediate strategic landscape is dominated by a single fact. Iran now possesses the most advanced road-mobile ICBM force outside of Russia and China, a capability that has fundamentally transformed the calculus of conflict in the region. In short, the Hwasong-18 transfer is not just a regional development. It is a global strategic pivot. The implications extend far beyond the Middle East, affecting NATO planning, U.S., homeland defense strategies, and the broader architecture of nuclear deterrence. As nations scramble to assess the scope and limitations of this new capability, one reality remains clear. The era of predictable regional power dynamics is over. The strategic playing field has shifted in ways that demand immediate adaptation, innovative planning, and an acceptance that some previous assumptions about security and deterrence are no longer valid. The transfer of 500 Hwasong-18 missiles to Iran has profound implications for regional security. For decades, the Middle East strategic equilibrium relied on predictable deterrence. Israel's qualitative military advantage, backed by U.S. support, ensured that regional adversaries were constrained by fear of overwhelming retaliation. That equilibrium has been shattered. Iran now possesses the means to project power far beyond its borders, creating a peer-level nuclear deterrent previously unseen in the region. Every calculation, from troop deployments to missile defense coverage, must now be reconsidered. The presence of a road-mobile ICBM force with intercontinental reach means that the region is no longer just a strategic periphery of Western interests. It is a global flashpoint. This new reality amplifies escalation risks. Any conventional or preemptive strike against Iranian missile facilities could trigger retaliation not only against Israel, but also against U.S. forces and interests across the Middle East. The existing Iranian missile arsenal, combined with the new Hwasong-18S, creates a multi-layered threat that complicates targeting decisions. Even a limited strike could cascade into a broader conflict involving proxies, critical infrastructure attacks, and disruption of global energy markets. The economic and humanitarian consequences would be catastrophic, dwarfing any tactical gains from neutralizing the missile force. Washington and Tel Aviv are confronted with an unprecedented strategic dilemma. On one hand, failure to act could embolden Iran and undermine regional deterrence credibility. On the other hand, any decisive military action carries massive costs. This calculus has forced leaders to reconsider traditional approaches to deterrence and conflict management. The previous assumption that nuclear and advanced missile monopolies confer absolute security is no longer valid. Israel now faces the reality of a regional adversary capable of surviving a retaliatory strike while still posing a credible threat to Israeli territory. The logic of the Samson option, which historically stabilized the region by promising catastrophic retaliation against existential threats, is now challenged by a capability that can endure and respond to nuclear attacks. The broader global implications cannot be overstated. NATO allies, European capitals, and U.S. homeland defense planners must now consider the Hwasong-18's reach in strategic planning. Every missile launch from Iranian territory could threaten locations thousands of kilometers away, forcing recalibration of early warning systems, command and control protocols, and missile defense deployments across multiple continents. The ability to conduct a coordinated, rapid, and effective response is constrained not only by geography, but also by the political and operational realities of dispersed launchers and mobile reentry vehicles. Meanwhile, Tehran's strategic posture benefits from deliberate ambiguity. By not confirming or denying the nuclear capability of these missiles, Iran introduces uncertainty into every defensive calculation. Every potential launch is treated as a nuclear threat, compelling adversaries to plan for worst-case scenarios. This strategic ambiguity enhances Iran's deterrence while complicating intelligence assessments and operational planning. Every move by U.S. or Israeli forces must now account for an opponent capable of surviving first strikes, maneuvering missiles in real time, and leveraging a combination of conventional and nuclear threats in a single coordinated response. The regional response is also evolving. Gulf states, long reliant on U.S. protection and Israel's qualitative edge, are accelerating procurement of advanced air defense systems and exploring closer military coordination with Western powers. But the logistical and technical challenges are immense. Integrating new defense systems, training operators, and developing effective multi-layered coverage takes time, and the immediate threat remains potent. In effect, Iran's acquisition of the Hwasong-18 has created a strategic environment where time itself is a constraint. Every day that passes without a new equilibrium increases the risk of miscalculation. As a result, policymakers and military planners face a paradox. Options exist, but all are fraught with consequences. Preemptive military action risks regional war. Covert operations are too slow. Sanctions and diplomacy encounter strategic resistance. Missile defense is economically and operationally limited. The only path that might stabilize the situation, direct negotiation, acknowledging Iran's new deterrence position, is politically unpalatable in Washington. Yet ignoring this reality is equally dangerous, leaving Israel and the United States to navigate a threat environment for which no historical precedent exists. As we move into part 6, the strategic consequences of the Hwasong-18 transfer become clear. The global order faces a critical inflection point. For decades, the Middle East operated under a balance dictated by conventional military hierarchies and nuclear monopolies. Iran's acquisition of 500 road-mobile intercontinental missiles disrupts that balance completely. This is not just a regional threat. It is a global strategic pivot that demands a recalibration of nuclear deterrence, power projection, and alliance commitments across multiple continents. In Israel, the implications are existential. The country can no longer rely solely on the Samson option as a guarantee of survival. The concept of mutual assured destruction, which worked as long as Iran's capabilities were limited, now faces a practical test. If Iran can endure an Israeli nuclear strike and still respond with its own nuclear-capable ICBMs, the very logic underpinning Israel's deterrence is compromised. Operational responses such as dispersing forces, maintaining continuous alert, and activating underground command centers are essential, but they are stopgaps in the face of a fundamentally altered threat environment. Israel must now consider strategies that go beyond traditional deterrence, exploring both technological and diplomatic innovations to maintain national security. In Washington, the challenge is similarly profound. The U.S. must weigh every potential response carefully. Military strikes risk catastrophic escalation and regional war. Covert action might degrade Iranian capabilities over time, but cannot neutralize the immediate threat. Diplomatic and sanctions-based measures confront the strategic reality that Iran's objective was precisely to create a position too costly to reverse. Missile defense expansion, while politically convenient, remains economically unsustainable and operationally insufficient against 500 advanced ICBMs. Direct negotiations, though potentially stabilizing, clash with domestic political constraints. This strategic paralysis is not failure. It is a measured acknowledgement that hasty action could lead to outcomes far worse than the current situation. Globally, allied nations must also adjust. NATO and European capitals now face potential targets within Iranian missile range. Homeland defense protocols, missile early warning systems, and strategic planning must account for a credible threat that previously existed only in theoretical scenarios. The Hwasong-18 range, mobility, and survivability force, a rethink of everything from operational planning to alliance coordination and even the fundamental assumptions behind nuclear deterrence. The strategic horizon has shifted and nations must adapt quickly to avoid miscalculation. The introduction of strategic ambiguity, uncertainty about whether the Hwasong-18s carry nuclear or conventional payloads further complicates decision-making. Every launch, every movement must be treated as potentially catastrophic. This ambiguity strengthens Iran's deterrence position, making every potential preemptive or reactive action extraordinarily costly. Military planners cannot operate on assumptions alone. They must treat every scenario as a worst-case threat, reshaping both immediate operational priorities and long-term strategic planning. Despite the gravity of the situation, there remains a path forward, though it is politically complex. Dialogue, negotiation, and carefully calibrated signaling could stabilize the region without triggering escalation. Strategic restraint on both sides, combined with credible commitments, might prevent conflict while preserving the possibility of incremental arms control measures in the future. Yet, such a path demands patience, political courage, and acknowledgement that Iran now holds a deterrent capability that cannot simply be erased. In conclusion, the Hwasong-18 transfer represents a watershed moment. 500 advanced, road-mobile, intercontinental missiles in Iran's hands fundamentally alter the strategic landscape for Israel, the United States, and the wider world. Conventional assumptions about deterrence, escalation, and regional stability no longer hold. Every nation in the Middle East and beyond must adapt to a reality where the threshold for conflict and the risks of miscalculation have increased exponentially. This is the new strategic reality, one in which preparedness, intelligence, and diplomatic acumen must work together to navigate the most dangerous nuclear and conventional environment the region has ever seen. The world has changed overnight. The balance of power, the logic of deterrence, and the very concept of regional security now require recalibration. Understanding this reality is not optional. It is essential for any actor serious about maintaining strategic awareness in an era where a single weapons transfer can redefine the entire geopolitical order.